Welcome back everybody to Keenan K TV. In today's video, I would like to start a two-part series where I go over 5 reasons why both Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson could beat one another. So with this video, I would like to start off with Tony Ferguson defeating Khabib Nurmagomedov. How could he beat him and what are the reasons behind them? Before we get into that, be sure to drop a like on the video, and if you guys are interested in supporting the channel even more, there is a Patreon linked in the description below, or you can head over to teespring.com and purchase exclusive merchandise of the channel. With that being said, let's start off with the first reason. When we take a look at the height and reach, Tony Ferguson definitely has the advantage in this department. When you take a look at the height difference, they're not too far apart from one another. But the real big difference lies with the reach. Tony Ferguson has a whopping 6.5 inches of reach in his favor over Khabib. And if I'm not mistaken, Edson Barboza was the fighter that had the longest reach out of all of Khabib's UFC opponents. Now the main difference between Edson Barboza and Tony Ferguson lie in the way they fight. If we take a closer look at how they both like to fight, we're going to see that Edson Barboza is a very long-range, defensive-minded fighter, willing to take the outside just to keep the range. When it comes to Tony Ferguson, however, Tony is an all-in fighter. He will come forward, walk you down, keep you busy, fire shot from odd angles, fight in the pocket if he has to, likes to throw deep kicks, quick short elbows in the clinch. And in general, he's just a very difficult fighter to get a read on and to keep him off of you. And this will lead us to our second reason that is very much so in line with his height and reach. His pressure. Tony Ferguson's pressure is just unlike anybody else in the UFC. Never mind the lightweight division. He's what I would call a very awkward fighter. Now, his awkwardness and his pressure and activity on the feet, which is not the only pressure that he presents by the way, I will come to his grappling pressure in a moment. But touching back on the stand-up department where he pressures his opponents, he is a fighter that is in most scenarios a taller and rangier fighter out of all of his opponents. And sometimes if need be, he will stick behind a jab and just try to pick the opponent apart from there. But no mistake can be made that will only lead up to the deterioration of his opponents and breaking them down slowly but surely. That will inevitably lead him to start to drown his opponents with his pressure, with his striking. He will come at you with a jab and he will transition into a spinning elbow. If that misses, guess what? He's going to try it again and again and again. And it is really ridiculous to even see a fighter like that compete against all of these high-level mixed martial artists and just completely drown them. If you take a look at him, technically he's not really the most advanced or excelled striker by any means. He's probably not going to go in there and, win a boxing match or a kickboxing round for that matter, or just anything that is unrelated to MMA. But really the only thing that truly matters is MMA. He doesn't really need to be the guy that has a perfect textbook technique, because in the end, just like Bruce Lee once said, the best technique is no technique at all. And this really speaks volumes, and you have to really understand what he meant by this. If we take a look at Tony Ferguson, yes, he may be very odd and awkward and you may just see him with his chin up in the air and just walking into shots occasionally and getting dropped. Really, Tony Ferguson's ability to recover, take a hit is just so outstanding to a point where throughout all of these fights that he participated in, you would have to imagine that somebody would supposedly catch him or drop him and knock him out. Yes, some were able to drop him, but nothing to the extent of Tony Ferguson being completely outstriked. And the main reason to this is, in my opinion, his unpredictability, his insane pressure that just keeps up, and the way that he can endure punishment and still come forward, and just his way to outsmart his opponents is just unparalleled. Nobody really in the lightweight division can match him in the striking department. Now, if you take a look at his grappling, the same way that his striking is unpredictable, awkward, unorthodox, that is exactly how he transitions and fights in the grappling department as well. He can try and go in there and all of a sudden ankle pick you. He will go in there and dive in for an Imanari roll. Always fight off of his back, be active, slice you up with elbows. Continuously be active, try to advance positions, try to secure a submission. Everything that you can think of, Tony Ferguson will probably continuously try to execute. And most people cannot do this due to the fact that their bodies just cannot really compete at the same frequency, activity as Tony Ferguson's, because Tony has the perfect frame, the perfect body. He is thin, doesn't have too much muscle mass, he doesn't really get tired because of it, has crazy output, a big arsenal, great consistency, and in general, he is just a very, very difficult fighter to deal with. One thing that you can never really underlook is experience in MMA, and Tony Ferguson has a lot of experience. He has beaten the best that the lightweight division has to offer in these last couple of years, going on in a 12-fight win streak, beating Barboza, Thompson, Rafael, Kevin Lee, Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, just a who's who list of fighters that competed at that division. And with that comes a lot of knowledge that can really be only earned inside the octagon. How to go in there and take a punch, how to go in there and survive, how to go in there and pace yourself for 5 rounds. These things that made Tony Ferguson successful have already come with his long experience in MMA against all of these opponents over all of these years. Really, Tony Ferguson is arguably one of the more experienced UFC lightweights out there. And that is going to be something that will have to come into play come fight night. When it comes to the grappling department, the ground game, whatever you might want to call it, really, if you even think about anybody going in there and having that as a potential reason that could defeat Khabib, that seems to be like a pretty unrealistic thing. However, at the same time, looking at the entirety of all of Khabib's opponents and compare the opponents that he's already faced with the people that he hasn't faced and taking a look at their grappling, really, Tony Ferguson is the only guy that is, in my opinion, for a lack of better terms, creative enough, daring enough to even go in there and try and do something. Now, these things, they all align, right? His height, his reach, his pressure, his jiu-jitsu experience, his stamina, all these reasons as to why he can win, they all play a great role in each respective reason. Now, if we take a look at his jiu-jitsu, his grappling, really, he is probably the only guy in a division that is as lanky as he is, and really the ability for him to go all 5 rounds, the ability for him to go in there and push the pressure, and for him to go ahead and go after Khabib ruthlessly, even on the ground game, is something that is completely exclusive to Tony Ferguson. Nobody else in the lightweight division you could name that would even go ahead and try to really come at Khabib and really make it a fighter's fight, a really dig down deep fight. That is only Tony Ferguson. He will probably go in there and try to do something that is already a lot more active than any other Khabib Nurmagomedov opponent once he has taken down the opponent. And yes, it may be true that there is only so much you can do when Khabib is sitting on your legs and you're trapped up against the cage, but we have to understand that Tony Ferguson, out of all these people, has to be the guy that is not really going to get tired out and gassed out. So throughout the longevity of the fight, given his own grappling skill, being a black belt under Eddie Bravo's 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, a system that is really made around no-gi and MMA jiu-jitsu, I would only have to believe that Tony Ferguson is the only guy that is going to be putting up a fight even in the grappling department. Now, how can you not talk about his stamina? The man is incredible. He is a freak of nature. He is, in my opinion, has a better gas tank than Nate Diaz, somebody who's already known to have great stamina himself. But the main difference is really lying at the fact that he is able to go 5 rounds. But that is not enough. He's able to go 5 rounds. He's able to go all throughout every fight and keep up the same pressure, the same output, even put out a greater output, become better as the fight goes on. That is something that is really unheard of, especially out of any of Khabib Nurmagomedov's opponents. Now, if we take a look at Khabib, he's always taken on all of his opponents, right? Except for Gleison Tibau back in whenever, but that is kind of irrelevant. Coming back to being taken on by Khabib, the pressure that he puts on you, the weight that he puts on you, after a round and a half, 2 rounds, his opponents, all of them start to seriously fatigue. Barboza, Dustin Poirier, Conor, Michael Johnson, all these guys who, if you take a look at them, they, objectively speaking, even in the stamina department, they don't really have better conditioning, better endurance than Tony Ferguson. So let alone grappling stamina, let alone jiu-jitsu, wrestling stamina, these attributes that those opponents could not match in the stand-up department, they really didn't have much of a chance in the grappling department either. So Tony Ferguson is the only guy that can even go in there, in my opinion, and survive and still be fresh and still be able to go in there and put the pressure on him, even after being taken down, held down, and put Khabib's weight on. In my opinion, in the end, this is going to be the most important fight in the lightweight division. It is going to be the biggest and most meaningful fight in the UFC's lightweight championship fight history. But for now, these were only 5 reasons why Tony Ferguson could potentially defeat Khabib Nurmagomedov. I will be making a more in-depth video where I talk about why Tony Ferguson can beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I will also do the same for Khabib. But aside from those 2 videos, I will also make another video where I talk about 5 reasons why Khabib would defeat Tony. With that being concluded, in the end, only time will tell what will happen. For now, I have been Keenan from Keenan K TV. Leave what you guys thought of the video in the comment section down below. Signing off.